Hello and welcome to Perch Peak Pods, the only place to get long-form interviews with some of the world's leading global mobility experts. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Becky Woods from ADP. Becky, introduce yourself to the community and tell us how you fell into the world of mobility.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Great to be with you today. So I'm Becky Woods, Senior Director of Global Mobility. I've been with ADP a little over 8 years and in the industry about 18 years. I like to say I got into global mobility when I moved myself in my early 20s to Costa Rica when I decided, gee, maybe it would be fun to go see if I'd like to teach English as a career and practice my Spanish at the same time.
So I love that. That is off script straight away, but let's get into it. What drove that decision and why Costa Rica? How did it go?
It was really great. I had already, during my undergraduate studies, done a semester abroad in Spain and really enjoyed it. And again, like I said, I wanted to practice my Spanish.
Yeah.
So I said, all right, let's check out Latin America. And I researched the different countries, and Costa Rica's, very safe and politically stable, things like that. So I took a, quote, home finding trip and went down with my family on vacation and explored what possible career opportunities I have. Met some people, had some contacts there.
Nice.
And then said, again, I wanted to see if teaching was a career I'd like to pursue. And I know I'd be able to teach English down there as a second language. So it was a good fit. So I always tell people when I eventually decided to full-time go into global mobility, I'm helping you move as my colleague. You have the corporation backing you up. You have relocation benefits. I did it on my own without anything. You'll be just fine.
It gives you a bit of leverage if people are sort of saying their package isn't big enough, and you're like, okay, I know it's possible without any of this. So that's awesome. What was a quirk of moving to Costa Rica, something you didn't expect?
I think just really, truly being fully immersed in another culture. Again, when you're in a study abroad program through a university, it's a little different. You're with your classmates that have all traveled with you, and you kind of stay in a little pod sometimes. But really kind of just being on my own and having to figure it out. And you really learn not just about the other culture that you're living in, but more about yourself as a person. A lot of personal growth happens. So that was really neat.
Yeah, so cool, and such a cool country to go to for your first move. So that was sort of pre-official global mobility, but sort of dog fooding it yourself and getting that first-hand experience. Did you go straight from teaching into the world of mobility? What happens next?
Yeah, so then I decided, because I had first worked at a law firm thinking I wanted to be a lawyer, and then I pivoted, I tried the teaching, and I said, both of those professions are great. It's not what I want to do on a long-term basis. And I really like the idea of working in human resources, which does have a lot of legal aspects to it, as well as kind of teaching subject matter expert aspects to it. But I said I never worked at a traditional organization, so I decided to pursue my M.B.A., but I picked a program that had the international component. So I went to a school called Thunderbird out in Arizona, which, again, just the international M.B.A. program they offer. And from there, I started to explore the world of global mobility. There were a lot of graduates out of Thunderbird that eventually become cross-cultural trainers.
Wow.
And at this point, a lot of the relocation companies that were based in the Northeast had opened up operations in Scottsdale, Arizona. So we had a few large relocation management companies there. So again, some graduates from my university had jobs at BGRS. So I opened up conversations with them and learned more about the RMC world. And that was actually where I got my first job out of Thunderbird.
So interesting. That's so fascinating that people did go from Thunderbird like consistently to do cross-cultural training or whatever. Did you have, before starting at BGRS then, did you have much perception of what an RMC did and how it would work? Or was it really only when you started at BGRS that you were sort of started to like get your arms around the world of mobility?
Yeah, I had done a rotational HR internship while doing my M.B.A. And, I worked a little bit with the comp partner and the benefits partner and the recruiter. But I also worked with the woman who oversaw global mobility, and she was bringing Italians into the U.S. Nice. So that was where I really got to see firsthand, besides my own personal experience, but bringing others via a company experience. So that was pretty cool. And then I started attending conferences while I was in grad school. So I went to SITAR, learn
Yeah.
more about the cross-cultural world. SHRM at the time in the US had a global HR conference, and I went
Yeah.
to that. I started to learn more about Forum for Expatriate Management, about WERC, so the different organizations. And
Nice. That's so good. It's so rare to find someone that's through their sort of education, particularly their MBA, sort of started to uncover the world of mobility. That's such cool background. So then you at BGRS, and you had time at Expaticore, then you went in-house with News Corp, and now you're at ADP. Tell us a bit about your the program at ADP, because I know it's a very in-house focused program. Give us a little, and I know that's always something of interest to people. Just give us a little bit of oversight, and then we'll dig in from there as to like the pros and cons of running in-house programs.
yeah, and we've had an in-house program for, at least 25 years, like very
Wow.
long-standing.
Predates you then.
Yes. Yeah. And it was funny because coming from the RMC side, it really didn't feel much different.
Yes.
Because from what I hear when I talk to other global mobility professionals, they say, "How do you do it?" It's a lot of just time and energy and effort in the mobility operations, instead of just outsourcing to the RMC and managing an RMC. And I said, well, this is what I did at the RMC, so I don't know any different. And but I think what's really great about it for us and why it's a good fit for our program is, for us, kind of customer service is top notch. It's number one. We send out satisfaction surveys to our employees every year. We're always looking most closely at what was their experience like, and in terms of some of the ratings that they give us. And our philosophy is that if we can directly work with the end supplier, who will be the exact point of contact with our employee, that direct line of communication, we will be able to provide the most seamless experience for them.
Nice. I love that. I love that philosophy, Becky. And obviously, as someone that runs an RMC, it's like, got to be very careful here. But tell us about how you, particularly in your role, you look after international scope. And ADP is 60,000 employees or associates across dozens of locations. How do you find the management, the sourcing, the management, overseeing any escalations with local vendors in markets that might be far away from the US?
Yeah, it's a great call out, because we've had to look at our program and say, okay, for the different types of providers that we have in the supply chain, who does it make sense to have a global relationship with? Who does it make sense to have a regional relationship with? Or who do we go to one-off in this specific city?
Yes.
And we've done that across the entire supply chain. So for example, it makes sense, just to have one global tax provider for many reasons. I mean, again, for other companies, they might say, well, this other program management style works best for us. But we have found at ADP, what works best for us is the one tax provider. Other global providers you could have, do you have one global immigration provider, for example? But DSPs, there is no one global DSP provider. That just doesn't exist. Yeah. So then it's a question of, do you go to a regional model and you have a few different regional partners, or do you truly go city by city by city? Yeah. And again, just depending on what our needs are and what's available in the marketplace will drive how we've decided to set up the program and run it. But one big difference between kind of in-house and going through an RMC is all of the vendor management that does need to happen all the time. I spend with procurement, with contracts and renewing contracts and things like that. Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's something that is an interesting one, because it can be hard to get people through procurement and renewings and etc. And how have you set up processes in your team to try and make, for people sort of thinking, I wonder if we could do a bit more in-house? How have you tried to set up processes to make that efficient and high quality and sort of time effective for you and the team? Yeah, I think if you are evaluating, can we go in-house? Do we have the manpower for it? Yes. You do need to do that time analysis of how long does it take to service a file? And what kind of internal headcount do we need to have to manage our volume needs? And I do think this is where a lot of companies get stuck and say, well, look, we only want to have one global mobility professional and that's it. we know one global mobility professional can't do it all. You're going to have to work with an RMC.
Yeah.
But if you're able to look at your caseload and your types of moves and how much headcount can you get internally, and we've done analyses where I literally have a spreadsheet that's like 100 rows long, that it's every single type of assignment. What is everything you need to do for it? Create a cost estimate, create an assignment letter, counseling with the associate, initiating all the vendors, etc. And again, how much time does that take for the individual counselor, for the manager, for our finance analyst? Because, we'll have like an outsourced expense provider, but an internal finance analyst.
Yes.
So person by person. And again, what headcount do we need internally to be able to truly run the program well? Because if we're understaffed, we're not going to get that good customer service that we want to be able to provide.
Yeah.
And then, can I get approval through our senior leadership to have that headcount?
I love that, being so data driven in that build up. It's almost as though you're preparing for your own RFP and sort of thinking, okay, who do we need to staff up for this program, and going through that rigor there. I know people will be thinking, but what about forecasting? How do I try and predict how much volume we're going to have in different regions? We don't choose to relocate within mobility, 10 people here, 50 people there, etc. How do you approach that when you're doing that sort of data-driven analysis?
That's a great point. And even like during COVID, and what was the work we were doing during COVID, and how the assignment type shifted since then. So I co-manage a department with my colleague who oversees our U.S. domestic relocation program, as well as we have an affinity program in the U.S. and Canada where we will help people who are not moving through a company relocation, but just they're staying in their same city, but maybe buying or selling a home, and they want some help with it. So she manages those two teams, and then I manage global mobility and U.S. immigration. And what we've been able to do is we have some people cross-trained. So when volume goes down in one area, but maybe up in another area, we can shift the resourcing. So we can still justify a full-time role for them, but not just doing this one job. Now you're doing a little bit of this job and a little bit of that job.
Yeah, I love that. I love that sort of creating, because that's exactly this. As you say, if you just have one person, you're never going to do it. Either they're going to be up 24/7, it's going to be a bad relocated experience. But if you can even that out, and the more, in some ways, generalist you can make people, the more ability you have to flex up and down. So I love that as a golden nugget.
And you had also asked about, kind of how do you manage it under different time zones? And we've looked at things about, should we have one of our in-house counselors sitting in EMEA, and then they can more easily service the EMEA and APAC groups that are moving. And we also partner very closely with our HR business partners, especially outside of the U.S., and they will many times kind of act as extra support to our team. So if things need to happen quickly due to the time zone, they can help support real time.
Yes, I love that. So you've gone through with so much rigor there. How do you actually try and think about getting buy-in from the entire organization to utilize mobility within the in-house model?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what we've tried to do is really partner with the talent organization and constantly bring up to senior leadership, what's our volume? What are the types of moves we're doing? When we have expats out on a temporary assignment on a quarterly basis, we will give a talent update, which is, this is who's out. This is, are they slated to come back within the next 12 months? So we need to start thinking about their repatriation. Where are they going to go? Are you going to extend them? Having consultations, like I said, those upfront strategic conversations with the business, that really helps kind of keep us at the table and keep us in the forefront of their minds as they're thinking, we need to move someone.
Yes. Okay. I love that. And then you mentioned there this sort of, you go to leadership, you say, here's the analysis, here's how many people we think we need across finance, across counseling, across leadership within the mobility function. When you're sort of doing that's obviously the cost side of things. How do you sort of present to leadership the value of mobility generally? Because it's probably with an in-house model slightly more upfront cost because you have slightly more heads and than an outsourced. How do you think about saying to the business, here's the value of what we're doing as a group, as well as just here is the cost?
we do have a unique setup, and I've heard of at least 5 or 6 other companies that do this with U.S. multinationals, where we are actually registered as a broker of record in the U.S.
Nice.
Which enables us to commission share, referral share with one of our external partners. So our department can actually bring in revenue, which can help offset our headcount cost.
Wow.
So that's, again, not everyone.
It's the holy grail. It's the holy grail of being like, we're fully cost neutral. That's awesome.
Yeah. So we've been able to lead on that quite heavily.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, and companies look at this regularly as well, is your relocation under a central budget, or do each of the businesses pay for the relocations themselves?
Yes.
So decentralized. So, and at ADP, ours is decentralized.
Yeah.
So every single move we have, we're working with the finance partner to say, look, this is how much it's going to cost. Make sure you have it in the budget, and working closely with the accruals and throughout the assignment length. But that's also where, if you have that more centralized budget, I do think the eyes are more heavily on your program.
Yes,
versus
exactly.
when it's dispersed.
Yeah, because if it's dispersed, it's little and everywhere. And often we find no single person has ever really looked at the fully rolled up cost at times, because it's just, it's like every department and country has it. Whereas when it comes to, sometimes people are like, wow, it's a big number that we're spending there. Broker of record, super interesting model, sort of real luxury. Very international community that listen to this. Lots of folk in the US, lots of folk outside of the US, where it's obviously not often illegal to do broker sharing fees. Your role is super international in your half of things. I'm assuming there's no revenue outside of the US / Canada in that. Okay, so it's just shared, not some holy grail for international organizations there. Next thing I wanted to touch on was often, in-house teams. One of the questions is still relatively small teams. How do you ensure you're staying current with industry trends, best practices? You mentioned COVID. Like, how do you deal with topics like that? And often people will lean on their tax, RMC, or immigration partner for that. With a more sort of in-house model, I know you've done a lot of work building your network within the wider industry. Tell us about how you've tried to build that network and how you try to leverage it to stay on top of trends.
Yeah, it's a great question, because our industry is so niche, and you'll find people who enter the industry and they stay forever, right?
Yeah.
They've been in it 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Because they love it. I feel like I'm one of those people as well.
This is such an aside, Becky, but I still have flashbacks to the first ever forum for expat management I went to, and I was like, why is everyone best friends here? What's going on? I've never felt like such an outsider initially, because it was sort of thinking, crikey, everyone's like, oh, hello, oh, you've changed jobs, oh, you've got in-house now, oh, you're back on the, it was sort of this weird sort of gathering of people that have known each other for 20 to 30 years. It's crazy. But as you say, it's very niche industry.
Yeah. So, networking, like you said, I mean, there's that initial networking that's, everybody seems like they're this one big clique. How am I going to break in? But actually, if you just put forth a little bit of effort, you will easily enter the clique. Yes.
Yeah. It's a very welcoming clique, shall we say. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would always encourage people to first of all go to events, right? Yeah. And be it online events. We have corporate benchmarking calls, join on video, make comments, get your name out there. Always stay active on LinkedIn, and not just go to your regional events, because you will see the same people there over and over and over, which is wonderful, but also broaden more than that. And for example, I'm East Coast based. Whenever I have an opportunity to get out to the West Coast or to the South or North, I always try to take advantage of that, because I know I will still see people that I know, which is wonderful, but I'll have more opportunity to build those relationships with other people that I don't normally see.
Yeah, I love that. And it's such a, regardless of whether you're an in-house or outsourced model, you're still getting a lot of weird and wonderful questions from the business as to what's going on. And it's so helpful to have those people just to sort of nudge and say, hey, what's going on, or have an idea of what people are working on. What have you found to be most helpful from getting out there and meeting people in the industry?
I think it's critical to remember that you can learn anything from anyone. It could be from somebody who works in your industry, or somebody who works in a different industry, or somebody who's another corporate, or somebody who's a service provider. And you should never turn down an opportunity to learn, and be curious. So whenever I'm at conferences, I will always make sure I go to the exhibit hall, because I want to know who are the new players in the industry. What's the new technology out there? What are other service providers doing that maybe I can bring back to my current service provider and say, hey, they're doing this. Are you doing it as well? Or can you do it? Or, is it time to make a switch and do a refresh? A lot of companies, the procurement department mandates that you go out to RFP every 3 years, every 5 years.
Yeah.
But even before that, you should always know what's coming, what's available. Go look at the tech demos if you can, even if it's not something you think you might need now, because you might need it in the future. Maybe you're going to switch companies and they need it.
Yeah, I love that. So many golden nuggets right there. One is not being reactive to the knock from procurement saying, hey, it's time to go to RFP, and being like, oh, yikes, I haven't spoken to anyone for you. Stay out there. And I love that approach and we love this as well, of saying to your existing providers, hey, I saw this cool thing, can you do this, or is there a reason why you don't do this? They might have a good reason, of course, but actually looping them in, because that's how we raise standards across the industry, by sort of embracing and encouraging new tech to come in. And I think that's something I really love, and I think it's on the service provider side, I think it's encouraging to hear people with that attitude, but also there's like a quid pro quo that people just need to be friendly in these situations and not oversell on the service provider side, and then all boats can rise in the industry whenever people sort of are embracing those best practices across the different tech demos. And I know you were very, very kind to Perchpeak early on and sort of say, oh, what are you doing? How can we help? As you say, maybe not now, in future, or someone else you might know. And that's such a good attitude to have. For people listening, if you had to pick one, it doesn't necessarily need to be a named event, but if someone's never been to an event, would you recommend starting with a smaller regional type event, one of the bigger ones like a Worldwide ERC or FEM? Like, what have you found to like dip your toe? Where have you found to be effective?
I would say you do have to think about what is your budget, and do you have any travel constraints?
Yeah, that's so true. Very pragmatic, Becky. Very pragmatic. Yeah.
But I would say, if you're just brand new to it, probably starting at those smaller regional events, like you said, dipping your toe, feeling it out, versus going straight, for example, to the WERC annual symposium. You're going to feel very overwhelmed.
Yes, yeah. You're going to say it's a lot of people, a lot of sessions, maybe stuff that you're not familiar with. Tell us about that. I assume you've had to sort of lobby internally for budget at times to go to events, and this is something we hear like, I'd love to go, but I can't get the travel signed off. We don't have our own budget. I can't get the cost of the ticket signed off. Like, how have you approached trying to sort of say this is worth it?
Yeah, we will plan, and when I say we, and not the company, but internally in my department, we will plan at least 3 years out of what conferences and travel do we think we need and want to attend. And when we can kind of group things together, we will. For example, if I need to see my HR partners in London, maybe I can time it during the event of some mobility conference that's happening and try to get 2 for 1.
Yeah, a twofer. Nice. That's so good. And you're just learning so much here. Just planning far out. Means you can tie in, see your HR partners, potentially see vendors based there, whatever it might be, sort of really roll it up into one. 2, if you're planning budget or asking for budget, it seems, in some ways, it seems a lot more strategic to ask for it, 1, 2, 3 years out, or, saying, hey, can I go to this event in September? Here's why I really think it's relevant, than 3 weeks before saying, oh, hey, I just happened to see this pop up, and, like it's sort of last minute, etc. So I love that. 3 years out, that's really, really incredible.
Yeah, and that way we can also plan, okay, if there's one annual event that's really good, well, I'll go this year, my colleague will go next year, I'll go the following year. So we can again say to the company, look, okay, maybe we don't both need to go every single year, but we need coverage every year. This is an important event.
Yes.
At least one person to go. And we've had to make business cases and write business justifications as to why something's important. So to your point, it is critical to show to leadership, this is well thought out. This is not a willy-nilly, I just want to go have fun in Vegas.
Exactly.
This is a really important business conference. Here's why. Here's what we're going to get out of it. And I've heard of people, I do this sometimes as well, after they go to conferences, they'll come back and they'll put together PowerPoint slides to show to their leadership to say, here are my takeaways from the conference, and here's what I'm going to change in our program as a result, to show the value add of attending.
I love that. And that goes back to the point. It can be sometimes, you're going to get some utility out of it and something will come. Not always 100% clear up front, but circling back and being like, hey, this is what we actually learned, or this is what we're going to go explore. I love that. And then this is with my leader hat on, saying, well, actually, that it's good that they went to the effort to show the value of that, so to speak. Let's change tack completely. So ADP, 65,000 employees, big mobility team, big program. You've worked at smaller in-house programs at News Corp, small service providers in Expaticore, and then obviously very, very big RMC in BGRS. How have you found working at such different sizes of organization, both in-house and on the service side?
I think what's neat about my background and others in the industry as well is when you've had a chance to work at different places with different specialties, you can really figure out and decide, hey, I was in kind of more of a generalist role. Like I worked at a company with a smaller program. I was a one-stop shop. I did everything. I had my fingers in everything, versus becoming a specialist. And I worked at this large organization where we had our own immigration department. We had our own tax department. We had our own mobility strategy department. I just did mobility operations.
Yes.
And you really could deep dive into an area. So I think it's neat as people kind of go through their career journeys, if they can have opportunities to experience those different things, because then you can really decide, hey, I really loved immigration law. I want to go be an immigration lawyer and be in that the rest of my life. Or I really love, the real estate market and the corporate housing industry, and that's the niche I'd like to stay in. Or is it, I'd like to work internally, and not only am I dealing with the external providers and, like I said, managing the supply chain, but also internally and creating policies and working with finance and working with your corporate tax team and payroll and things like that. So for myself, kind of having the exposure to the generalist type role versus the specialist type role, and then both on the corporate side and the supplier partner side, just, made a neat experience for me.
Yeah, and I love the learning from both elements. When you do something very specialist, you learn whether you like that. When you do lots of little of lots of things, and you get to be like, which aspects do I enjoy? And I love that sort of thinking that's coming through so strong, is that, okay, I'm in a generalist role. Which elements of it do I love? Are there roles out there that I could do a lot of? When you were thinking about taking an in-house role for the first time, what, was that a very conscious decision to think, okay, I want to now sort of go in-house? Was it a scratch the itch? And how have you found that comparison?
Yeah, and it was very deliberate. When I was at Expaticore, we did both international HR consulting as well as payroll services for our clients. So a lot of the outsourced expat administration came to us. So it was very similar to working at an RMC.
Yeah.
And what I noticed is the founders of the company, whenever they would pitch to new clients, they would say, oh, well, I ran this corporate program for 15 years, and I ran that corporate program for 10 years, and I've been in your shoes, and I know how it's done, and I can offer that lens, as we're helping you with set up your program. And I could never say that because I had never had that internal corporate experience. So, I said I would really like that experience. It sounds like it can be quite valuable. And so that was how I made the switch. And people would ask me later, well, kind of reflect on it. And what do you think you like better? And I'd say, well, for me, what I like about being on the corporate side is you are making the policies, you are making the program decisions, you are deciding, are you going to have a regional model or a local model? And are we going to provide this benefit or not? And use this technology or not? And you like that, right? Because you can put your thumbprint on something.
Yes, yeah, it's sort of very tangible. It's not less advisory and as well. That we're actually going all the way through, and that policy's getting sort of finalised, signed off. That budget's getting finalised, signed off, and it is super hands-on. But I definitely, to go to your point on the industry being small, if you enjoy the industry, as I know so many folks do, trying to get experience from both sides, people lean on that. When you see this sort of people like yourself, it is powerful to be able to say you've been on both sides, you've experienced it, you've had that in-house experience as well as that that service provider side. So I love how strategically you're thinking around building your position within the org. Completely different change of tact. As you know, we have a tradition on the pod of leaving the previous guest leaving a question for the next guest, and I think you're going to really enjoy this one in the sense of it's right up your alley. So, question for you today, Becky, is a lot of the trends in wider global mobility over the last 10 years have been driven by the technology industry and some of the booming programs, Amazon, Apple, Google, etc. But even there, and that really sort of changing the balance of some of the traditional programs, being more assignment focused, being more permanent transfers, focused on tech, etc. So tech's been a big driver of general mobility trends over the last 10 years. Over the next 10 years, which other industries do you think are going to have a big impact on mobility more widely?
See, it's an interesting question, because when you first started talking about it, and I started thinking, what are hot topics? What are the new trends? And everybody's just talking about AI, which is tech.
Exactly, which is more tech, exactly.
So is it going to change?
Probably not, maybe.
Not.
Yeah, maybe it will just be more tech. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Are you using AI at all at ADP in your mobility function right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking at what can we automate? How can we streamline processes? How can we free ourselves up for more value-added work? What could we offshore? How can we make better use of our resourcing?
Yes.
So there's a heavy push on it, and and I feel like a lot of times the constraints companies have are just getting the IT resources to do the job, or maybe kind of privacy roadblocks, and we can't necessarily share this information due to privacy concerns, things like that. But as the technology evolves, I think we will have more opportunities to automate where we can.
Yeah, so. I like the sort of framework you started leaning on there of like, oh, what can we automate? Great. Maybe you have some internal tools. Maybe you have to give up some resource. I think AI is huge for that. I think what can you delegate? You mentioned offshoring there. Like, are there other teams that could do this either at a lower cost, or maybe they have tools that can automate it? And then what can you delete as well? Are there things that you've done forever, but maybe just no one really knows why they're done, and you sort of look at each other and go, okay, well, I wonder how that one came to be, because those three things are great. So we're sticking with tech being the big driver over the next 10 years, which I would definitely agree with. It sort of feels like it's, even with the range of mobility programs and types going on, tech does seem to be such a big driver of everything going on.
And you don't need to have a long-term assignee somewhere if through technology, people can have multi-country teams, and do video calls. And did you really need to go there on an extended business trip?
Exactly.
Just a series of calls. As soon we'll be doing holograms.
I know. I'm not quite ready yet, Becky, but soon I'm bracing for it. And we'll enhance the podcast. We can be sitting across the table on hologram, which would be great fun. But anyway, Becky, thank you so much for being so generous with your time today. It's been a whistle-stop tour through such an interesting career in mobility, and you were one of the first people we spoke with when we entered the space, and I've always enjoyed sort of seeing you at events, seeing you on LinkedIn. So thank you for coming on and sharing so much wisdom with the community. Thanks very much for jumping on.
Great, thanks for having me.